Martian Manhunter is one of the best characters in all of DC Comics and is at the top of my list when it comes to characters I really want to see in the DCU, and because of that, I want to try and cast Martian Manhunter for James Gunn's new DC Cinematic Universe. I have a list of 9 actors that I think could very likely be in the running for the role, and at the end of the video, I will give my top choice. Of course, I'm no casting director, so if you think I'm way off base with my choice, please let me know who you would like to see play Martian Manhunter. But now, to kick off the list, let's start with the actor that I've probably seen fan casted the most in the role, that being Mahershala Ali. And yeah, I absolutely think he would kill it in the role, and if he had any interest in playing the character, DC would be very wise to give him the role. Now, spoiler alert, he's not going to be my top choice at the end of the video, not because I don't think he's talented, because honestly, out of all the actors we're going to talk about, he is probably the most accomplished actor on this list, but I just don't think it's all that realistic. The reason I say that is because he is still attached to play Blade in the MCU, which honestly, I'd be shocked if the film ever sees the light of day in the next 5 years, but that does seem to be a role that he's actively pursuing, and until that changes, I don't see a major commitment to the DCU as being a real possibility. But say you're watching this in 6 months and that's changed and it's been announced that Mahershala Ali is no longer attached to Blade, he would certainly vault up to the top of my list. He is an absolutely phenomenal actor that I think would be able to capture the stoic but empathetic demeanor of Jon Jones. Also, even though we have no idea how old of an actor James Gunn and company would be looking for, I do feel Ali is probably in that age range as he is currently 51. I do think going with a much younger actor and getting somebody closer in age to somebody like David Corenswet could make sense so that you have an actor who could play Martian Manhunter in the Justice League alongside Superman for a long time to come if the DCU is lucky enough to go on for 10 plus years. But I do feel that Martian Manhunter most of the time is depicted as the adult in the room for the Justice League, so having a bit of an older presence certainly does make sense. And that's probably the most likely outcome, and I'd say 51 is definitely right in that age range, even though I do think it might be a little bit towards the top of the scale. But for somebody like Mahershala Ali, if he wants to do it, you just put pen to paper, because that would be a huge win for DC and immediately bring some prestige to Martian Manhunter. Next, I want to talk about David Jonsson, who unlike Ali is at the opposite end of the age range and in the eyes of some may be too young for the role, which I do totally understand. But if you wanted an actor who is the same age as Corenswet and could play the role for the next 10 to 20 years if the DCU is lucky enough to go on that long, I really do think this would be a home run choice. For those of you not familiar, Jonsson is best known for his work in projects like Alien Romulus, The Long Walk, and the show Industry, which I have not yet had the pleasure to watch, but in Alien Romulus and The Long Walk, he is absolutely phenomenal and I think steals the show in both films. As an actor, he showcases great emotional depth, range, and just has a very strong presence about him in general that I do think would lend well to his take on Martian Manhunter. I totally understand for some of you if his look and his age is going to completely rule him out of the running for this role. I understand it. He definitely does not possess the elder quality that we typically associate with Martian Manhunter, and maybe his voice is a little bit too high. However, for all of the actors on this list, I didn't want to rule them out exclusively on voice alone, because we've seen plenty actors in the history of Hollywood lower their voice or change their voice entirely for specific roles, and I do think his voice is low enough that I do think if he focused on making it lower, he could definitely fit. I do truly think that Jonsson has the talent, as he has showcased amazing acting ability in his previous work. Similar to Aaron Pierre and Millie Alcock, I really do think Jonsson is an actor who is only going to become more widely known as the years pass, and it's the exact type of actor I think DC would be really smart to bring into the DCU. As these actors get more popular outside of their work in DC, it would only increase the likeliness of success for the DCU. One actor that I personally love, and I totally understand why he is constantly fan casted in the role, but I just do not see happening, is Idris Elba. Now, I do personally think that Elba is a very good actor, and if he were to be casted in the role, I think he'd be able to deliver a phenomenal performance. He has the voice and the gravitas to deliver a truly awesome Martian Manhunter, so if they casted him, I would be excited. But honestly, I would rather just get Idris Elba back as Bloodsport instead of seeing him as Martian Manhunter. Whether it's an appearance in a future Suicide Squad movie or say Peacemaker Season 3, I think DC already has a phenomenal character for Elba that they should be looking to utilize more going forward, because for lack of better terminology, he was fucking awesome in the Suicide Squad. Also, even though he does not look it at all, at 53, I do think you are getting a little too close to being a bit too old for the role, unless the plan for Martian Manhunter is to only show up in 1 or 2 movies or perhaps a television series over the next few years. But honestly, if you told me that Idris Elba looked the exact same in 10 years, I also would not be shocked. I have no doubt that Idris Elba would be great casting for the role, but I cannot lie, I'd be a bit disappointed that it would most likely mean no more Bloodsport, who I know is not likely to be making an appearance anytime soon in the DCU, but damn it, I'm gonna keep dreaming, because I thought he was one of the coolest characters DC has put on the big screen in the last decade. Sterling K. Brown is another popular choice for the role, and rightfully so, as he's an immensely talented actor that simply deserves an opportunity like this. He is probably most known for his work in Black Panther, which yes, was a pretty small role, however, a vital role in a humongous movie, but for Sterling K. Brown, a lot of his work has been done on TV and things like This Is Us and Invincible. His voice is just immaculate, and I think would be absolutely perfect for Martian Manhunter, but of course, plus more importantly, through his work on both television and movies, he has showcased immense range, and I have no doubt that he'd be able to give Jon the gravitas that the character deserves. In many of his roles, he's also showcased great emotional depth, which is vital for a character like Jon, who has such a tragic backstory. Of course, Jon is not what I would call the most outwardly emotional character, but he's also not a character devoid of emotion. When he does face his past trauma, there is plenty of emotion that needs to be displayed, even if it is a bit more subtle. In terms of age, Sterling K. Brown is currently 49 years old, so that is certainly right in the age range I expect Gunn & Company to be looking for when casting, and I really do think he'd be a great choice. Also, even though he was in the MCU, I do think it was far too small of a role to take him out of the running for something like this. Another MCU alum that I could see DC reaching out to is Chiwetel Ejiofor, who certainly has the talent as shown by his Best Actor nomination, as well as a very awesome and diverse film catalog. Plus, at the age of 48, he's probably close to the ideal age for the role. Ejiofor has been a working actor for decades now, and I do think he's a face that people recognize, and obviously that would bring attention to Martian Manhunter right off the bat, as Ejiofor would already be one of the biggest known actors in the DCU, but I do think perhaps he's possibly a bit too known for his role in the MCU as Baron Mordo. Now, obviously, it's not like Mordo has been a huge character in the larger story of the MCU, so if he were to be casted, I do not think it would be a huge deal, but I do think it's better to see lesser known actors who have yet to maybe have their big break, or known actors who have simply not worked in something like a DC or Marvel project, as I think it makes it easier to see that person as just one singular character. For example, I'm immensely excited to see Sebastian Stan potentially play Two-Face in the Batman 2, but I can guarantee you, when I see the trailer for the first time, at some point in my subconscious, I'm going to say, wow, that's Bruce Wayne and Bucky Barnes, which is absolutely ridiculous, but I do think honestly having diversity in actors in these projects is a good thing to have, as it makes them feel more unique, and it's something that I've changed my tune on a bit, because I didn't necessarily think it was that big of a deal until making more casting videos like this and talking with you guys, because some of you are really adamantly against that, and I totally understand it, and I think it's probably the smart way to go. Of course, I'm not trying to say that Mordo is anywhere close to as important as a character like Bucky Barnes, so I don't really think it'd be that big of a deal. However, I definitely would like to see some diversity, and honestly, when it comes to what I'd like to see from Ejiofor, I'd like to see a lot more Mordo in the MCU. Next one is an actor I didn't even want to put on this list because I just think it's unrealistic to think he would take the role of Martian Manhunter, but it's somebody that I've seen fan casted a lot, and it's somebody that I absolutely love, and I'm totally sure DC would be ecstatic if he wanted to take the role, but let's be honest, they're not going to do it, and that's of course Michael B. Jordan, as it feels he's probably way too expensive, and there's a good chance he's just past this part of his career, unless something like Val Zod actually materializes. He's already done plenty of superhero fare in the past, of course starring as Killmonger, Johnny Storm, and even voicing Cyborg, so I definitely think he's not against working in the superhero genre, and maybe, just maybe, if you add enough zeros to a check, it could work out, but honestly, I kind of think it'd be a huge miscast. Now, I do think Jordan is an absolutely phenomenal actor that would be able to adapt and portray a really good Martian Manhunter, but Jordan, at his best, has immense charisma, and casting him as Martian Manhunter just feels like you wouldn't be getting the best version of Michael B. Jordan, which is absolutely magnetic in things like Creed and Sinners. I want to be clear, I'm not trying to make it seem like Martian Manhunter is some sort of dull character or lacks personality, as that is not true. I do think it would be really interesting to see the emotional depth and power that Jordan could bring to the character, but if Michael B. Jordan were ever to join the DCU, I would much rather see him play a character that is less stoic and restrained. However, say we are in the one timeline where Michael B. Jordan says yes and does play Martian Manhunter, it would be obviously A+ casting for DC, because this is an actor that you would absolutely want to have in your universe. I know I just talked about Ejiofor perhaps having already too big of a role in the MCU to play something like Martian Manhunter, and the same could be said about Michael B. Jordan, except for the fact that Michael B. Jordan is damn near an A-list star that would put butts in seats, unlike Ejiofor, who I do think is well known, but it's not comparable compared to Michael B. Jordan. So even though I would prefer some diversity, Michael B. Jordan is not going to be my pick for this video. If he's casted, there's no denying this would be a phenomenal move by the DCU. One actor who's really been on the rise over the last couple of years is Coleman Domingo, and I think he'd personally make a really good Martian Manhunter. Over his years as an actor, he has showcased phenomenal range. He has a really strong presence about him that I think was really evident in something like Running Man, where I honestly thought he was the best part of the movie. He's really great at displaying emotion, and I think he just has the exact type of demeanor that you would want for Martian Manhunter. Alongside that, his voice is absolutely phenomenal, and I definitely think would fit for the role. However, sadly, I think it's possible Domingo might be a little bit too old for the role, especially if Martian Manhunter isn't set to be making any appearances in the DCU anytime soon. Maybe if he shows up in Man of Tomorrow, it wouldn't be that big of a deal, as that's something that would be shooting in the next couple of months, but say Martian Manhunter doesn't make an appearance in the next 3 to 4 years, it's very likely that Coleman Domingo could be pushing 60 by the time we get any appearance of Martian Manhunter. Again, he looks fantastic for how old he currently is, but do you want an actor in their 60s playing a Justice League member? I don't know. Obviously, we've seen the DCU has not shied away from that already with casting somebody like Kyle Chandler as Hal Jordan, but sadly it appears Hal Jordan might not be long for this world, and I really hope that's not the case with Martian Manhunter. I want him to be a part of the DCU for many years to come, so I definitely think maybe getting a younger actor would make more sense. I do think Domingo would be really good in the role, and I would be excited if he was announced as Martian Manhunter. Tramell Tillman is an actor who, depending on his role in Spider-Man Brand New Day, could be out of the running for Martian Manhunter, as he could be committed to the MCU for the foreseeable future. But if, say, his role in Brand New Day is a one-off appearance, DC would be wise to get Tillman into the DCU, and I think Martian Manhunter would be a role he would absolutely knock out of the park. He's an absolute scene stealer in Mission Impossible and Severance, and if casted as Martian Manhunter, I think that'd be no different. He would make Martian Manhunter an absolute presence on screen, and he would absolutely steal the audience's attention, which would be huge for the character in the DCU. One negative I could see for Tillman is the fact that his voice may be a little bit too high, but he is an actor who I'm sure could lower his voice to a place that we kind of more expect from Martian Manhunter, so I'm not going to rule him out for that reason. And he is currently 40 years old, which I think is about the perfect age that they should be looking for, as it's slightly older than Corin, Sweat, Pierre, and Alcock, giving Martian Manhunter a bit of an older presence. However, it's still plenty young enough so that Tillman could come into the role and play it for many years to come. A bit of a lesser known name, especially compared to the actors that we've already talked about on this list, is Abubakar Salim, who is best known for his work on shows like House of the Dragon, Raised by Wolves, and his extensive voice acting career, which is highlighted by his work as Bayek in Assassin's Creed Origins, and I think he would be an absolutely phenomenal choice for this role. His work in Raised by Wolves specifically gives me the most confidence, as he plays father who is an android tasked with saving the human race, and that character does have somewhat of a similar energy and demeanor to John. Of course, it's not a one-for-one, but as an android, he has an otherworldly energy about him that I think would suit him really well for Martian Manhunter, and he already has a very deep voice, but with an extensive career in voice acting, I have no doubt he'd be able to deliver a soothing and deep voice that feels like a necessity for a character like Martian Manhunter. And shockingly, he's only 33 years old, which makes him only a year older than Corin Sweat, which would set him up to play the role for years to come. But honestly, I was quite shocked when I saw he was only 33 years old, because in roles that I've seen him in, he definitely feels a lot older, so I have no doubt he'd be able to play older as Martian Manhunter. However, now it's finally time to put on my casting hat and make a final decision on who should play Martian Manhunter in the DCU. I do truly think that every actor that we have talked about in this video would be an exciting choice, but for me personally, it came down to two names: Sterling K. Brown and Abubakar Salim. I truly think both possess the voice, presence, and acting ability to deliver the exact type of Martian Manhunter that I'm hoping to get in the DCU, but there can only be one, and if I had to choose, I would go with Abubakar Salim. I think he's just perfect for the role, not only when it comes to how he would present on screen, but he's also more than a decade and a half younger than Brown, and he's probably going to cost a bit less to sign, which ultimately should not be a big factor. But as we've seen so far with the DCU, they seem to want the IP to do the selling and not the names attached. And even though it's not like Sterling K. Brown would probably have a humongous asking price, it's definitely going to be higher than Salim, which I'm sure would be attractive to DC. But honestly, I also think he's just the perfect choice for the role, and if money was not a part of the equation, he would still be my top choice, as I think he's in that perfect spot of his career where we know he already has a pretty good track record of performing in some pretty big projects and even doing some phenomenal voice actor work in some humongous games, but he's not known for any other specific role, and I think that's a really good place to find somebody. For example, it's happened a lot in the MCU with the likes of Chris Evans, Chris Hemsworth, Tom Holland, where yeah, you may have known them from a project in the past. Chris Evans maybe a little bit more so, but their fame and popularity grew because of the roles that they were in the MCU, and they're always going to be those specific roles because those were their big breaks. I think that's a great place to be casting actors for these specific roles, and it's something that the DCU is already doing. For example, Aaron Pierre, David Corin Sweat, Millie Alcock, yes, you knew them previously, but ideally in the next couple of years, they are going to be known for specifically starring as Superman, Supergirl, and Green Lantern, and I think Salim would absolutely fit that mold, and also he is an immensely talented actor that I think deserves an opportunity like this. However, now I want to know, who do you want to see casted as Martian Manhunter in the DCU? Make sure to let me know in the comments. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you all in another video.